Hey everybody, Matt Colville here. You may remember in my previous video where we talked about cargo cult thinking, I mentioned that players show up to your game because they want to play. They want to play in the context of our series. They want to play D&D. I think that's an important point, and it references something way back in one of the early videos I made where we talked about players making characters and how making characters is sort of this price you have to pay in order to play the game. And it's something that some people enjoy doing, but it is kind of a pain in the butt and it is work. It is not playing the game. And I bring this up because there was a thread on my subreddit /r/Matt Colville. There's always a link to that stuff in the doobly-doo, where someone mentioned the fact that they had thrown against their player. Their players had a ship on the ocean. They had their own ship and they were on their way from point A to point B. And the dungeon master threw, as sort of a random encounter, I think, a ship full of bad guys at the players. This encounter was overwhelming. It was more than deadly. Now, the details of this post and this encounter are not, I don't want to get too far into it because the point isn't the post or the details therein. It's this scenario, which comes up all the time, which I have been guilty of. I think all dungeon masters go through this at least one point, where they throw something ridiculously nasty at the players with the expectation that the players will run or surrender. And when the players don't do that, the dungeon master is flummoxed. Why didn't my players turn around, retreat, surrender? And I think the answer is because they showed up to play D&D. They didn't show up to run away from things. They didn't show up not to fight, not to roll dice. They showed up because they wanted to be heroes. And the measure of their heroism is judged against the nastiness of the encounter. The nastier the encounter you throw against the players, the more likely they are to want to go at it, because they're going to see it as overcoming impossible odds, which is part of the fun of the game. And if you're not aware of this, if you don't realize that this is part of the player psychology, then you're going to throw encounters at your players with the expectation that they will run or surrender. And when they don't, you'll be frustrated and you'll think, though, they're dumb. Why didn't they understand? Why didn't they take all the hints that I gave them? And at the end of that process, they didn't have fun, and you probably didn't have fun, and the only thing you have to kind of console yourself after the game, help you sleep at night, is the fact that you warned them or you gave them information or they should have known better. And I think that is cold comfort. I think we can do better as dungeon masters. I say this having done it myself many times, and I think I still have it in me to do that. I don't think I've gotten better in the sense that I do it less often, but I still think I have it in me that notion of teaching the players a lesson, that kind of encounter, showing them that the world is dangerous and capricious and that there are crazy powerful things out there that will wipe them out in an instant. And to show them that, I'm going to throw one of those things at the players, I think it sounds good on paper, but is a misunderstanding of the player psychology, which is down to the player motivation. Why do the players show up? It's because they want to play D&D. They want to be heroes. They don't want to run. They don't want to surrender. In one of the first campaigns the first campaign I ever played in, run by my friend John, who was my first dungeon master and was a long-suffering dungeon. He was like a year or two older than the rest of us, but he was still like, we were all just teenagers together. We were dumb, and he put up with stuff from us that I would certainly never put up with now. And I can't believe what a bunch of wang rods we were when we were teenagers. No matter, like, all the bad player stories you ever heard, we did it. And John had to suffer through it. And there was an adventure he was running. And in the adventure, and I know this because later in my life, I now cannot remember the name of it, but later in my life, I found this adventure and I read this section that explicitly tells the game master that at this point, the players should surrender. You're going to put a bunch of guards in front of the players who have come to arrest the player characters. And it says in the module, do whatever it takes to get the characters to surrender. And this is incredibly bad design, I think. And it talks about how the guards, their swords glow, their armor glows, explicitly to send a message to the players that these guards are all outfitted in magical armor and have magical weapons. And you can kind of imagine how this scenario went. Why would I even be bringing it up in this video if not for the fact that we didn't surrender? Screw that. We wanted to fight. And in fact, we thought we had a pretty good plan, a pretty good way to beat these guys. I had a magical arrow. I had several magical arrows because John gave me these 5 cool, unique magic arrows, which I loved. I thought it was awesome, great treasure. And one of the arrows could destroy a section of stone. The idea was like a siege arrow, and I don't remember how big this section was. I think it was only like 10 by 10, but I abused these arrows to no end. Our plan was one of the characters would open up the portable hole that we had. I would shoot the arrow into the ceiling. We'd all jump into the portable hole. The ceiling would collapse on us and the guards, but we'd be safe inside the portable hole. The rubble would crush the guards, and then we would emerge from the portable hole safe. This was a terrible plan in many ways. And like, why would we be able to get out of the portable hole if it was covered in rubble? But John, reading the module in the adventure, they used to call them modules, reading the adventure where it says, do whatever it takes to get the players to surrender, John had the portable hole explode. And the reason he gave us was that we were at that time in a kind of pocket universe, and we were trying to open one pocket universe inside another pocket universe. Well, I mean, that makes sense. That makes sense, but it's something he invented in that moment, and we knew that. We knew that rule had not existed prior to that. Although there was some precedent there with the bag of holding portable hole trick, which if you're not familiar with, I'm not going to spoil for you right now. But we were all really frustrated because it wasn't a question of did his explanation make sense? It was a question of the fact that we thought we had come up with a good plan, and then he thwarted it, and we could tell he was thwarting it just to thwart it. We didn't know what it said in the adventure. We didn't know that it said do whatever it takes to get the characters to surrender. But that kind of thinking, again, it belies the player psychology. It fundamentally misunderstands the player. Why did the players show up to play? You may think it's good for the story, for the players to understand that life is capricious and there are times when they just have to surrender and the world is a dangerous place, surrender or retreat. But the players didn't show up to write a story. You can do that at home without anybody else. The players showed up because they wanted to roll dice and kill stuff. There is obviously a lot more to D&D. That is a very reductive thing to say, but at its core, that's what excites the players, is getting to do cool stuff, getting to play their character, right? Getting to play, which doesn't always mean rolling dice and killing stuff, getting to play their character. And there is implicit in that the notion that their character is a hero. Yes, there are many times in fiction where the hero has to surrender. The hero is outnumbered. But a character in a film surrendering to the bad guys is a very different kettle of fish from a player character in a D&D game surrendering, because the author knows when the character surrenders, the author knows that there's going to be an awesome dramatic moment later on that will give them the opportunity to show off their heroism by escaping. But the player does not know that. In fact, the player may have many reasons to believe that's not true. We're playing D&D in my friend Phil's game. Phil is running a great D&D game. It's already some of the most fun I've had playing D&D. I'll put a link to his player handout. Don't be overwhelmed. I posted this on Twitter, and many people were overwhelmed with the amount of detail and work Phil had put into his handout. And I had to reassure them, like, look, my handouts are usually only 1 or 2 pages long, with exceptions. Stay tuned. Phil's running this game in a very low magic world, and that's something I really enjoy about it. And I also just really like the fact that Phil definitely understands his. I have not read the whole handout, by the way. I skimmed it. I seriously read like the first 6 or 7 pages, and I skimmed the rest. But what was important to me was that Phil believed all this stuff, that to Phil, this is a real world, and that makes it feel more real to me. We found ourselves in a scenario where we were on our way from point A to point B. We were injured. We had gotten in a fight in town, and we had the opportunity to leave town and go into the woods. And I argued, let's just go now. Let's leave now. Why rest? Nothing's going to happen on the way from here to the woods. Let's leave now, and we'll rest when we get to the woods. Somehow I managed to talk the rest of the players into that, and as a result, when we got ambushed by bandits, most of us had no spells. We had very few hit points. And then we did an incredibly stupid thing. We followed the bandits to their bandit hideout. And I'll try to post a picture of it here. Phil, because he's an artist, he drew this battle mat in Photoshop. He did it all in Photoshop and then took it to Staples and printed out for like $30. So a whole bunch of people online were like, oh my God, where did you get that printed? And he was like, it's $30 at Staples. If you can draw this, which is the trick, if you can draw this, then it's easy to get it printed. We followed the bandits back to their bandit hideout, and we decided to assault the ambush in spite of the fact that we still hadn't rested, and now we're even lower on hit points. We're a 3rd level party, so a couple people had some 2nd level spells left, but we ended up in a scenario where half the party was unconscious, and the entire time Phil was thinking, why did you guys do this? You knew that these bandits had a bandit hideout, and you knew that there were a ton of bandits there. We had all the intel we needed. Why did we charge into it? Well, because we wanted to be heroes, because we wanted to play D&D, because we wanted to have a good time, and as it turned out, Phil, I think without pulling many punches, he made every roll I can remember he made in front of us. We managed to find a way out of it. We used tactics and strategy, and we used our abilities well. And I happened to roll. I was the unconscious cleric, so there was no healing to be found. But I happened to roll a 20 on one of my death saving throws. So suddenly I was at 1 hit point, and I was back in the game, and I was able to use my cantrips. Didn't make a huge difference in the battle because I was out of all of my healing spells, but I had some cantrips. And through judicious use of Ray of Frost and kiting the bad guy and working together as a team, we managed to overcome the bad guys. And Phil remarked, between two of these sessions, we had to take a break, very cliffhanger moment. After I went unconscious, we took a break. Phil remarked to me, because he sits next to me at work, he said, this is exactly what happened in the first session of your D&D game that Phil played in, my D&D game that Phil played in, and he's exactly right. The players had just had a big battle in the inn. Some of you heard me talk about this. They had a huge battle in the inn. They were out of spells. They were badly wounded, and they heard something going on outside the inn, and I thought they were going to rest. I thought surely they're going to take at least a short rest. Nope. They went outside the inn. They discovered more bad guys, the boss bad guy, outside the inn in the fog at night with his little small army of undead, and they decided to fight. And in that battle, the cleric went unconscious, and it looked like they were not only going to get routed, they were all going to die. But then the cleric rolled, just like I did, rolled a 20 on his death saving throw, was back up and back in the game, and that turned the tide of battle. In both instances, the party knew what they were getting into. They had good intel, and in both instances, they decided to go for it, because what is the point of playing D&D if you're not going to go for it? I think in both instances, both parties would have been fine with a rout. We knew what we were getting into, and I think that's the difference between just throwing an impossible encounter against your players with no warning, or throwing something at them with the hard expectation that they're going to see that they're overwhelmed and they will surrender. Don't expect that. Expect that they will fight. And when I was dungeon mastering, when Phil was dungeon mastering, we both gave the players the opportunity to get into trouble, but not the requirement. And when we got into trouble, we knew while it was happening. Phil was worried. Phil was really worried as a dungeon master, and I could see him trying to think of ways to try to what's the word? I want to use the phrase I normally use because I want this to be a G-rated channel. He wanted to find a way to help us out. And I told him, I said, don't do that. Like, I don't want the DM to help us out. Either we live or die based on our decisions and our die rolls. And that, I think, is the difference between a good dire encounter and a bad dire encounter. Bad dire encounter, there really is no chance. It doesn't matter what the players do. And at the end of it, they feel like we never had a chance. That was dumb. Whereas we knew what we were getting into. And if I was already thinking during the little break we had during the cliffhanger, I was already thinking about what kind of new character I was going to roll up. I liked Phil's campaign. I liked the game. So I was looking forward to continuing playing. And I knew, look, if we all die, it's because we were dumb. It's because we made a dumb decision. But it has taken me 30 years of running the game to understand the difference between the players feeling like, look, if we die here, we knew what we were getting into. It's our fault. And the players getting smoked, never having a chance and feeling frustrated. I'm not sure I can exactly detail what the issue is. Hopefully you watching this have some sense of it, but I think it's mostly giving the players good intel and the opportunity for the players to understand what are we getting into? We're hugely outnumbered by a whole bunch of bad guys, some of which are way too high level. Screw it, let's go for it.
It'll be a slaughter!
That's the spirit!
No, my slaughter!
Just be aware if you ever find yourself in a scenario where you're thinking the players will surely surrender at this point because I have them so badly outnumbered, or surely the players will retreat because they will see that this giant three-master, this huge sailing ship outfitted with all sorts of high-level pirates and bad guys is no match for their tiny little dinghy. But that exact scenario is what fuels the players into thinking, wow, we should go for it, we should give it a shot because even though we're outmatched, if we win, we'll be heroes. It's the reason we showed up. Plus, they want to roll dice, and you're giving them a chance to do it. You're giving them a chance to roll dice. You're sort of, it's like a trick. It's like you're trying to fool your players, and they will feel that way. They will feel like they were tricked. Well, you knew we wanted to roll dice and kill stuff. Why did you put this thing in front of us? And your answer, listen, it's a dangerous world out there. Terrible things happen, isn't going to make the players any happier. It's not going to mean they think, oh, well, I guess I had a good time then. A scenario where you want the players to be aware that the world is a dangerous place and somewhat capricious, a scenario like that, have there be a character on the ship who is aware of that pirate ship and knows how nasty they are. And let's work this out. Think about it. If you go to that player and you go, listen, there's this famous pirate ship and they are way too high level for you guys. They will wipe you out, right? All you're doing is you're giving one player enough information. He can now try to talk the other players out of it. But they're not going to want to be talked out of it. They're going to want to go fight the pirate ship.
I've always wanted to fight a desperate battle against incredible odds.
I guess if there was a lesson, it's this. Never put an encounter in front of your players without considering that they're going to go for it. They're going to attack this thing. They're going to fight it. They're going to assault the ambush. And if you ever find yourself designing an encounter on purpose to get the players to surrender, I think perhaps we have made a mistake. And I say we because I have done that in the past, and I am sure I will talk myself into the fact that the next time I want to do it, it's different, and that I'm an experienced dungeon master. And then when it fails, I'll think back to this video and go, why didn't I listen to me? That's the video, folks. Just talking about surrendering, retreating, and what is the player's motivation? What do they want to do? And why it's probably a bad idea to thwart those expectations. Because after all, they showed up because they want to roll dice. They want to do cool stuff. They want to be heroes. Let them. I hope that was useful. I think the next video will be the undead video. A little bit of research necessary, which means it takes a little bit longer. Thanks for watching, folks. If you're new to these videos and you want to help support the channel, everyone else has already heard this a million times, come by the doobly-doo below. There's a link to my Amazon page where you can buy some neat stuff. I'm not going to tell you what it is. It's a surprise, but it involves fantasy, action, adventure, really wild things. Until next time, never give up, never surrender. Peace out.